Hi class, and welcome to your next video on macromolecules. So the first thing we want to talk about is what is an organic compound, because all macromolecules are organic compounds. Anything that has some backbone of carbon, so it's largely composed of carbon, is called an organic compound. The four types we talk about in macromolecules are lipids, carbohydrates, proteins, and nucleic acids. And many of these you ingest. So they are vital to life. So macromolecules are just large molecules made of many subunits called monomers. So we'll talk about these building blocks. And monomers are kind of like Lincoln logs. When you make a whole house, you have a big unit. And when we put a lot of monomers together, those are called polymers. So the whole house made out of Lincoln logs is a polymer. But the individual Lincoln logs are what makes it up, and those are the monomers. And so we put a lot of monomers together to make a polymer. So to put these together, we go through a process called dehydration synthesis. Each macromolecule is composed of monomers or smaller subunits, like we just talked about with the Lincoln logs, and these have to be put together through a chemical reaction. So in order to do this, we combine hydrogen and what's called hydroxide, or OH, on opposite ends of a monomer. And we create a water molecule, and we form a new bond. So if we look at that, this is what happens in dehydration synthesis. First, we have the exact same monomer that we're linking together. And then we see on these opposite ends, we have the hydrogens and we have the hydroxides, and those are going to come together to form the water, because remember from our previous unit that water is H2O, so it has two H's and an O, so this will form that H2O. And then in the end we will have a linked polymer and we'll get rid of this water. Hydrolysis is exactly the opposite of dehydration synthesis. So what we're doing is we want to break down the organic molecules. Like, think about what you had for breakfast or lunch. You need to get the nutrients out of it. And in order to get the nutrients, you have to break apart the monomers so they're smaller subunits that your body can digest. Well, in order to do this, we go through hydrolysis, where we insert a water and to break the compound apart instead of taking out a water to build it up. So this looks like this. We're going to break down the polymer. Remember, lots of monomers together are polymers, and if each of these is a monomer, we're going to break it down. So we insert the water. You can insert it anywhere, but if we insert the water right here, then we're going to have these two subunits and these two subunits. And then we could insert another water here, and then we'd have these two and this one, and then we insert another water and we get another one there. So the water just breaks apart those subunits, which helps when we're digesting our food, but it has other purposes too. The first one we're going to talk about is lipids. And lipids are mainly involved with long-term energy storage. It gives you a lot of energy, kind of like a lot of bang for your buck. They're generally insoluble polar substances, or insoluble in polar substances. So water would be a polar substance that they are insoluble in. So think about your water and oil. If you ever put water on the stove and then you need to add a little bit of oil, that oil does not mix with that water. It will never mix. You might have little drops of oil and try and stir it up really quick, and it might become dispersed a little bit, but if you let it settle, then you'll see the oil level again. So not all lipids are what you eat. Lipids are also not all bad, but there are three types of lipids. So triglycerides are the type that we eat. There's phospholipids, which they compose our cellular membranes, and then there's steroids. They're really used for cell-to-cell communication, and they help with the structure of our cells as well. So the triglyceride, what you eat, is composed of two subunits, one glycerol molecule and three fatty acid chains. And the fatty acid chains can be characterized as saturated or unsaturated. This is where when you eat or drink something, it talks about saturated and unsaturated molecules or fats. And this is where we're getting this from. The next type is our carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are a chain of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. They're in a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. So for every carbon, you have 2 hydrogens and you have 1 oxygen. So the simple carbohydrate that we talk about a lot of time is glucose, and that is C6H12O6. So if we reduce this, we have a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio. So the function in carbohydrates is short-term energy, such as storage or such as sugar, and intermediate-term storage for starch and glycogen for animals. So carbohydrates are named on the amount of monomers strung together. So the monomer of a carbohydrate, all carbohydrates, no matter which one, is a monosaccharide. The monosaccharide is 1 subunit, and it can be used as a carbohydrate. You don't need lots and lots of these together. So we use glucose, which is 1 subunit. Well, when we string 2 of those together, we get a disaccharide, di meaning 2. And so 2 subunits of a sugar. And then the last one is a polysaccharide. When we have 3 or more of those together, we call it polysaccharide. And that has 3 or more subunits, which we usually consider a starch. So the next type of macromolecule is a protein. Proteins are important in biological systems, so they help with our control and structural elements of our biological systems. They contain CH and O, so carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and nitrogen. And examples of this would be enzymes, some hormones that you have, transport bridges across the cell membrane, and we'll talk more about that when we talk about the cell. Hair, hemoglobin, meats, all kinds of these have proteins in them, and not all proteins are exactly the same. So the protein monomer, it is an amino acid or an amino acid. There are 20 amino acids. Humans only make 12. So the other 8 must come from what you eat and drink because you still need all 20. The next form is a nucleic acid. Nucleic acids are polymers composed of monomer subunits known as nucleotides. So the nucleic acid is your polymer. The monomer is your nucleotide, so we build up lots of nucleotides in order to make the nucleic acid. So the main functions of nucleotides are to store information and to play an integral part in protein synthesis. Now, these are your DNA and RNA, what are located in the center of each cell. The nucleotides, which are always composed of a sugar. So it's a 5-carbon sugar like we see right in here or right over here, a nitrogenous base, and a phosphate. Now, there are differences in the nitrogenous bases. We'll go more into that when we talk about DNA. Make sure you got great notes and got great pictures from this. These pictures really need to go into your notes because they're going to help you. If you have any questions, we'll talk about them in class next time.